and experienced things that I thought I would never experience. I want to share a couple of the 2 or 3 of these things with you as I begin to preach.
All right.
I was assigned to the United Methodist Church in Topeka, Kansas. Topeka, Kansas at that time was so small that 20 minutes in any direction you would be leaving the city. But there's something that occurred in that time frame. If any of you remember Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court ruling, separate but equal in 1869, was a landmark decision by the Supreme Court. The ruling came about when a light-skinned black man got on a train and went across state lines. At that time, they were not allowed to go across state lines.
Yes, yes.
Plessy versus Ferguson said, separate but equal.
Yes, yes.
Can you imagine living in a world with separate but equal, separate housing, separate education,
Yes.
separated in jobs? Plessy versus Ferguson was in 1869, but in 1964, Brown versus the Board of Education, there was a ruling by the Supreme Court that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yes, yes, yes.
An attorney by the name of Charles Scott Sr. brought the case in Topeka, Kansas, that brought about the ruling. Thurgood Marshall tried the case before the Supreme Court. I pastored Charles Scott Sr.
My goodness.
Charles was a unique and unusual man, but lived in a small community where his life was threatened, his family was threatened. His secretary was murdered in the office, and no one was ever captured in that situation.
Yes.
I watched Charles Scott Sr. degrade. I watched him struggle. I watched the threats on his life in Topeka, Kansas. And yet there was something about this man who came to church every Sunday,
Yes.
who held on to the faith to know that it was necessary to change the landmark decision, Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yes.
Out of it came the ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education, where Thurgood Marshall tried it before the Supreme Court.
Yes.
I spent nights talking to Charles about the pain of what he was doing.
Yes.
Can you imagine one man standing up against a law that existed from 1869 to 1964?
Yes, yes, yes.
Can you imagine a man taking on that case, and that case transformed education, and separate but equal was killed?
Yes, yes, yes.
I looked at that man and understood he was a man of faith.
Yes.
When I pastored this church years ago, I had the opportunity to see this man grow and to use his God-given gifts. I had the opportunity to, as I pastored in Southern California, matter of fact, this church, to give a speech with Cesar Chavez down on the steps of San Bernardino City Hall.
Yes.
I was a keynote speaker, and so was Cesar Chavez, a very sharp man. Skin crinkled by the heat of working in the fields.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yet he was a man of faith.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I've watched life change because they were people of faith.
Yes. Yes.
I remember one morning in St. Louis, Kansas City, Missouri, where Dr., or what should I say, the Reverend Papa King.
Yes.
I had breakfast with him one morning, and it was myself at about 20, 21 years old, and about 2 other young men. While we were having breakfast, one of the young men asked Dr. Martin Luther King's father, said to him, "Do you hate white people?" Papa King sat back in his seat for a few moments. He stared out for a few seconds. He looked back at us and said, "What you don't know is I had another son that was killed. What you don't know is that my wife was killed while sitting on the piano in a worship service." He said, hate killed my wife and my 2 children. He said, I cannot hate white people.
Yes. Yes.
He said, because hate was what killed my family.
Come on now.
And if I hate, then I participate in the death of my own family.
Yes. 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 Yes.
I began to realize that there was a deepness in the faith movement of trying to transform our lives.
Yes.
What gave Martin and Cesar Chavez and Charles Scott Sr. the ability to walk by faith and not by sight?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What made them so unique that they were able to transform a nation by their faith? I remember Dr. Martin Luther King said Martin Luther King once said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole
Oh
staircase.
yes. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Hebrews 11 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. In other words, you're moving forward, but you don't see the end. You just simply have a faith to keep on moving forward and keep on building what God has put in your life.
Yes. Yes.
Dr. King also said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, I think about it 50 years ago in 1968, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, a man who gave us hope and love and the strength to believe that all things are possible, that there could be a transformation in our lives, that we can walk with dignity and stand by faith, that we can move forward even though the path before us does not seem like it's capable of doing so. But this generation, we seem to give up so easy. We seem to let things just roll out and on, not believing that there is the opportunity to transform whatever is going on in our lives. We live in a time of fear and stress and lies. We live in a time where if you go to church, you can be killed. If you go to school, you can be killed. If you go anywhere, someone might go up in a tower in a hotel room and shoot down into a crowd of innocent people. We live in a difficult time where it seems that there is stress on every side. And you need something more than just your education and your checkbook. You need something to hold on to in the midnight hour when everything is going wrong around you. You need to have hope, you need to have love, and you need to have the power of God living in our lives. I just want you to know, I serve a God that is able to defeat a president. I serve a God that is able to give people the grace and dignity to keep on moving forward. You ought to know and give God an amen this morning, because God is still on our side. In this parable, a certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. There are still people looking for a fruit on a barren tree. God is an amazing God. This little story doesn't seem like much, that there was one who came to find figs on a barren tree. But do you realize that there were other trees there? Trees that were bearing fruit. But this one tree was not bearing any fruit. Oh, I just want to stop down by and tell you that God has blessed you with fruit in your life. God has blessed you with gifts in your life. And that those who are seeking fruit today, they come to the church looking for ministry. They come to the church looking for a word of God. They come to the church seeking how they can walk by faith and not by sight. But yet they come to the church, and many churches are barren now. They have a good music department and they have a good shouting time, but when ministry comes along, when it comes to bearing some fruit, they're too busy, or they're too old, or they're too wore out, or they cannot see beyond the boundaries of what's going on. In other words, I'm a church member. I go to church, but I ask the profound question: what is your fruit that you are bearing this morning? What are you doing to feed the hungry and to clothe the naked? What are you doing to walk by faith and live as an example.
Yes.
You see, this tree
Yes.
had all the opportunities of all the trees.
That's right.
Received the same sunlight
That's right. That's right. That's right.
that gave it energy.
Yes.
Had roots that went deep into the ground, but was not bringing up any fruit out of the earth.
Oh, yes.
Received rain that gave life to the tree. In other words, you got all the benefits to bear fruit.
Yes. Yes.
You can't tell me you're too tired to come to church. You can't tell me you don't know anybody to bring to church. I've seen unruly children. I've seen unruly marriages. I've seen broken dreams. I've seen people's lives empty except for trying to get over and to get everything. I've seen everybody trying to take a selfie while they was down buying ice cream somewhere. That's not important. Or looking at your hair and saying, I want this style this week and this style next week. Life is more than that. I've seen folk try to live a life of prosperity that have no foundation for the relationship of God nor the church. I've seen fruitless ministries that go nowhere and do nothing. How many of you have invited somebody to church? How many of you have a testimony about what God has done for you? How many of you can walk by faith and not by sight? How many of you can live an example before your children, before your neighbors? I want somebody to testify and say, I know the Lord is real and the Lord makes a way out of no way. What if I told you
Yes, sir.
that the tree was the church?
Come on now.
What if I told you
Yes, sir.
that the garden keeper was Jesus? What if I told you the one who owned the garden
Yes, yes, sir.
was God? God came by looking for fruit on your tree. God came by wanting to use you like they did Charles, or like they did Cesar Chavez, or use you like they did Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, when he was a child, he didn't know he was going to be the Dr. Martin Luther King. It was God's plan. If you open up and let God in, and quit being so selfish and narrow-minded, and see the church as a place of entertainment, and come to let the glory of God unfold out of you. Oh, the Word of God. The Word of God. Yes. You're familiar with the word DNA?
Yes.
That's what makes up the substance of everything on earth.
That's right. That's right.
The fig tree had a purpose to bear fruit.
Yes.
It had been planted to bear fruit, and it existed to bear fruit. It was the nature of a fruit tree. Therefore, it was supposed to bear fruit. It had no other purpose for existence but to bear fruit.
Yes.
Herein my Father glorifies that ye bear much fruit, so shall ye be my disciples.
Yes.
John 15:8. God is asking you to bear fruit.
Yes, sir.
God is required for you to bear fruit. I want to get to the point. I was listening to the pastor, and he brought up Ezekiel. And he brought up that Ezekiel was picked up by God and transformed into a valley. And the valley was full of dry bones. God asked the question
Yes, sir.
to Ezekiel,
Yes, sir.
can these bones live
Glory.
again?
Glory.
His answer to God was, God, you know.
Yes, sir.
When we have started to lose our ability to vote in America,
All right.
when racism picks up its head and people are proud to be bigots and racists,
My Lord.
when we live in a time when the authorities lie and organize against the people who we love, It means that the folk are dying. Dying for direction. Dying for hope. Dying for a vision. Dying for another Martin Luther King. Dying for another Cesar Chavez. Dying for another Charles Scott. We want someone to tell us that everything is going to be all right. So he says, you know, Lord. And the Lord said, well, I want you to testify. I want you to testify to the four winds. And so I want you to witness to them. God needs witnesses today. Folks who are able to witness that God is a mighty God. That God gives me peace in the midnight hour. That God restores my values. That God gives me courage to keep on fighting. And so he began to testify. The Bible says from the four corners of the earth, something started to happen. When you start to testify in church, something starts to happen. When you start having a witness about God, something starts to happen. And the Bible says that there was a rattling deep down in the valley. And there was a noise down there that had never occurred before. And the Bible says that the bones began to come together. Oh, I thank you, God. When you start testifying, things start coming together. It says that the foot bone was connected to the ankle bone. Ankle bone was connected to the knee bone. Knee bone was connected to the hip bone. Hip bone was connected to the arms and shoulders. And the neck bone, and you know, hard bone up here. The head bone begin to take a place. I just want you to know that God is able to put you back together again. I don't care how you've been broken. I don't care how long your life has been in a bad situation. God is willing to put you back together. And there was something else going on. In the dry valley, they were still dead. Oh, they had come together. They got the name on the church roll. They were still together. They had blessings on every side. But they were still dead. You can see who they look like, but you can't see inside. There are too many folk in the church that are dead. Dead because they're selfish. Dead because they're narrow-minded. Dead because they don't have a ministry. Dead because there's no fruit. Dead because there's no blessing shared. Dead because they cannot transform the church to what God wants it to be. God said, go back. Testify. Testify some more. Testify some more. All of a sudden, the Bible says the dry bones got up. Oh, thank you, God. The dry bones got up. There was such an army that God could use. Well, what's this got to do with me, Pastor? Okay, I just want to know if you're not barren. Good. You cannot always be a Dr. Martin Luther King. You can't always be a Barry Sellers. You cannot always be a Charles Scott. But I got news for you. There is something that you can do. Then I'll tell you what that is. I want to tell you, the man said, I've come by for 3 years with God, and there's been no fruit. I'm going to tear it down. And the keeper, who was Jesus, said, Lord, give me one more year. Sometimes all you need is one more year. One more year to give God the glory of your life. One more year to be a transformative agent in your life. 1 year to stop the selfishness and become someone that God can use. And let me tell you what God will give you. I've got a gift here I want to give you this morning before I take my seat. I want to tell you about the Barren Fig Tree. The Barren Fig Tree that received everything that's required to be a servant of God. They had, but they were not using. But God said, if you want to bear fruit, let me tell you about the fruit I want you to bear. I want you to bear Galatians 5:22 and 33. But the Holy Spirit produced the kind of fruit in our lives. Tell you what it is. You may not be able to change the world, but it says the fruit is love. Or if you share love, then God will transform lives. The fruit is joy. Joy, even in a day of trouble. Joy when everyone else is sad. God gives you peace. Oh, I just love peace. When I wake up in the morning, I've had a terrible time. Then peace shows up. I'm free to keep on keeping on. Oh, I feel peace. Then God gives you the fruit of the Spirit. Patience. Oh, you want everything you want it now. I've got news for you. You don't deserve it now. You got to work hard. You got to wait for the Lord. The Lord will count up like eagles. You will be able to go over the problems of your life. Then you'll give you kindness. What's going on today is not enough kindness. Oh yeah, you can be nice in church. Get out the parking lot and start a fight. I've seen it before. I've seen it again. You can shout all you want, but if you don't have the kind of kindness that comes from God. Charles Scott was a kind man. Martin Luther King was a kind man. Caesar Chavez was a kind man. You've got to have kindness. Stop every once in a while while walking through the store and say, hi. Hope everything's going all right. Stop and tell a child, don't worry. God's on his way. Oh, I tell you, in Galatians it says kindness. Then there's goodness. Oh, there's goodness. Goodness is the thing you do in the light of day. Badness is the things you do in the nighttime. Oh, you good when you look like you good. And I got news for you. I know who you are. Because the Holy Ghost tells you who you are. Then there's faithfulness. Oh yes, I've seen folk run in and out the church door. They come looking for something, don't get it. They want to go to the next church. The next church. I've got news for you. Faithfulness does not start out there. It starts in here. Hallelujah. I just dropped by to tell you, all you dry bones, you ought to bear fruit. All you trees, you ought to bear fruit. I'm so thankful. I serve a God that requires you to bear fruit. Yeah. You know, Jesus is the vine. We're the branches. You can't do anything without being connected to God. Oh, I thank you. You can't find peace. You can't find joy. You can't find love. Church, wake up. Wake up. Bear some fruit. Wake up. I don't care how old you are. You still got some fruit. I don't care how young you are. You still got some fruit. I don't care what you've done yesterday. It's what you're doing today. Oh, Holy Ghost. Come on down. Oh, Holy Ghost. Come on down. Oh, Holy Ghost. Come on down. And make my bones. Come on down. Lord, let your Holy Ghost. Come on down. Lord, let the Holy Ghost come on down. Come on down. Come on down. Lord, let the Holy Ghost come on down. I want you to do something for me as I close. I'm going to ask you to do something. You don't go to school and you don't get an assignment. The assignment is this. You need to call someone and testify. You need, I've been in the church for 54 years. You've got a pastor who has a heart to feed the hungry. You've got a pastor who's willing to meet at his home with young people. You've got a pastor who's willing to work hard to preach a sermon that has power and spirituality. You've got a wife of the pastor who's willing to give up her time just to direct your choir. You've got the young children who are willing to sit down on the drum and the piano and tell the story of God. You've got everything it takes to change and transform lives. I need you to say, I know somebody that I need to testify to. I know somebody who's not in the church. I know somebody who's broken in their heart and their lives, and they need to have fruit-bearing lives. You can transform lives by simply saying, I've got a God who can do all things and do all things well. I've got a God who can restore my strength. I've got a God who will walk with me in the midnight hour. I've got a God who loved me so much. He gave his only son, Jesus. I've got a God who makes a way out of no way. I've got a God who loved me and hung on the cross of Calvary. And I might have a right to the tree of life. And I'm not a witness. And I'm not a witness. And I'm not a witness. If you wake me up this morning, if you allow me to stand, give you a testimony. How you get out of the hospital? God opened the door and let me out. Hallelujah. 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 Intermission when you come back in and complete the sermon. Every person who loves the Lord ought to bear fruit. God says if you bear fruit, you are one of mine. God did not save you to sit on your faith. God saved you so you could transform others into the faith. Won't you commit this week? You're going to get a lot of no's, but that's never stopped you before. It's never cut you off before. You keep on trying. I'm going to tell you a story about my son. When we lived in Riverside, he wanted to go to a school. He wanted very much to move forward. Things were not going well. I watched him go out to the mailbox in the front of the house. I don't know if he even remembers this. And got down on his knees and prayed in the front of that mailbox. Things changed.
My God. Thank you.
Not because he deserved for it to change, but because he was using his fruit that God gave him. He graduated from the university. Get out of yourself so much. Quit telling me about your aches and pains. Most of us deserve our aches and pains. All right. But God keeps giving you life. Bear fruit. Testify. Witness. And this church will go on for years to come. It should be filled with a group like this, a choir like this, gifts like this, preaching like this, singing like this. But it's not going to fill up just because you come here. It can only fill up when you testify. And I want to ask, how many of you have a testimony? I'm serious. How many of you have a testimony about what God has done in your life? Raise, do you have your bulletin? Give me bulletin. Pick your bullets enough. Listen to me. Now, these are testimonies. Wave your testimony.
Yes.
Now, you need to tell me how many folks waving those? How many? Just guess.
60.
It was 60, one testimony per person, and witness per person. That's 120, isn't it?
Yes.
God bless you. I'll take my seat.
Praise the Lord.
I don't wear these because I'm cool. I wear these because I'm old.
Praise the Lord. Come on, give God praise for that word. God is extending the invitation today through the preached word. That God is coming by someone's fig tree. He's coming down your row right now. And you are not bearing any fruit. Amen. And he said, maybe I should cut that tree down. But Jesus, somebody say thank you, Jesus. Jesus is saying, give them one more year, one more chance, one more try. If you know, if that is you, if your tree is not bearing the fruit that God has planted in your life, in your heart, then the altar is open for you to come on and say, Lord, I want you to give me one more chance, one more year, one more chance to serve you in your church, in your kingdom. The altar is open. The altar is open.